A federal appeals court ordering the judge in the Michael Flynn case to respond by June 1st to Flynn's petition to drop the charges against him, as the Justice Department had requested. That Judge Emmett Sullivan had instead appointed an outside lawyer to argue against the DOJ's request. Our next guest is author of the new book, Above the Law, the inside story of how the Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump. Former acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker is here now. We welcome him. Thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
First of all, take this big picture. What do you believe is the fate of General Flynn at this point?
Well, there is no discretion of Judge Sullivan to not dismiss the case once the Department of Justice has decided to no longer pursue those charges. So I think ultimately it's going to be a strange proceeding when the appeals court gets their filing from the judge trying to defend his actions. But General Flynn the case will be dismissed and the charges will no longer be held against him.
Go back to the initial delay of Judge Sullivan in this case, the delay to dismiss the charges once the DOJ put that to him. How unusual was that to see that from Judge Sullivan?
Well, the federal rules of criminal procedure govern this type of motion to dismiss from the government, and there's no discretion in this type of case for the judge. And so it was very unusual for not only him to take it under consideration, but also to appoint someone to argue in favor of maintaining this case open. I've never seen anything like this before. I've been a U.S. attorney and an acting attorney general, and I've just never seen anything where a district court judge has done something like this.
We've heard a lot from Andy McCarthy on all of this, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. He's had a lot to say about it. He's been writing a lot about it. This week, he wrote about Judge Sullivan's, quote, astounding and offensive refusal to dismiss the charges and says he must explain. Obviously, that's what he has to do by June 1st to the appeals court. Your prediction as to how this plays out?
Well, my prediction, so these writs of mandamus are a big deal because essentially it is telling someone to do their job, a public official. And when the Court of Appeals accepted the motion from General Flynn's counsel to compel the judge to dismiss the case, that's an extraordinary move. And so to have a district court judge have to respond to an appellate court is really, I can't think of another example where a judge has had to directly do that.
But then now to not have him directly do it, we know he's brought on this high-powered D.C. attorney to respond by June 1st. What does that action tell you about Judge Sullivan?
Well, it tells me that, first of all, that Judge Sullivan knows he's in tricky waters here. You know, I think one of the things that this case also tells us all as we look at the procedural history is that there are folks that are against General Flynn and you know, are not in favor of justice. One of the themes I talk about in my new book is how we need to make sure that regular order is followed, not only by the Department of Justice, but also by the courts, and how important that is for, you know, really the people of America to have confidence in the system. Because when a judge does something like this, completely goes rogue, creates a different proceeding that is not allowed under the federal rules, I think, you know, that the American people have concerns about that.
Turning the page a bit here to the revelation with the Susan Rice emails this week. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writing about Susan Rice's mysterious email. In it, they say Team Obama spied on Trump officials and tried to conceal it. You look back at those interviews dating back to 2017 where she said, I know nothing about it, about Trump officials being swept into this surveillance. The Wall Street Journal says now we know that denial was not true. What are we learning from these declassified emails this week, Matt?
Well, what we're learning is that January 20th email that Susan Rice wrote on the waning hours of the Obama administration ultimately recorded a January 5th meeting in 2017 where both President Obama, Jim Comey, and others agreed that any investigation conducted against General Flynn would be by the book. I don't know what book they were reading. The book that applies to this is the Justice Manual, and Jim Comey did not follow the Justice Manual in pursuing the prosecution and interview of General Flynn. And so I think, you know, there are very curious issues with this, including what Susan Rice said in an interview where she denied that she had any awareness of this.
You know, it was interesting to see her response to all this, not yet hearing from Jim Comey himself, but she responded through her spokesperson saying that they documented the contents of that meeting at the direction of Obama's White House counsel. She's downplaying the significance of the email, saying it makes clear no discussion of law enforcement matters or investigations took place. Does that explanation let her off the hook, Matt?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, I think there are several people in that room, including the Vice President, Joe Biden, that need to respond to these very specific questions, because it does appear that the White House was possibly directing the investigation into General Flynn. And obviously that is very concerning. And if Jim Comey and Sally Yates and others that were also in that meeting don't explain how this investigation was followed pursuant to the book, I think that is another issue that is going to erode the public confidence in this entire chapter in American history.
Former acting U.S. Attorney General Matt Whitaker, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, let's all honor our vets.